What we'll go through first is chapter 5, so government's role and government's failure. This won't be on the test. The test will only be chapters 1 to 3. So we're going to go through how the government's power to coerce can be economically beneficial, and there's a lot of difficulties with managing and directing the government. And then we're going to go through government failure and explain why it happens. So government can coerce through involuntary transactions. So this can be done through so one of the things that the government can do is reject a merger. So the government rejected the merger of BMO and RBC because it would become too big of a bank, and they would be able to charge consumers as much as they want. So this would be anti-competitive. So the government can block mergers from taking place due to anti-competition. That's something they can do here. And the problem with directing managing government, there's no invisible hand. So the government can do whatever they want. There's no invisible hand guiding them. There's a massive size and scope of the government, the need for bureaucracy, the need for paperwork and flexibility, the information aggregation problem, and lack of accountability. So there's not a lot of accountability. So the government can do a lot of things and not face a check and balance. So they could make decisions and not face they won't face a lot of stakes. So like there's no cost to them because it's not their money, and they're elected for usually 4-year terms where they can just do whatever they want with taxpayer money, basically. So there's a lack of accountability because like they need to face voters every 4 years, and they're in their job until they have an election. So the only accountability they have really is through elections mostly. So they could be voted out, but they basically have 4 years until they're voted out. So they could be doing a lot of bad things until they get voted out. So government failure is inefficient outcomes caused by shortcomings in the public sector. So the politicians can put their own interests ahead of voter interests, which happens, and then put the interests of a minority of voters ahead of those of a majority of voters. So that happens with focusing on certain groups, like let's say unions, let's say education workers, different types of associations. They may, the wealthy, they may be focusing on certain groups more than other groups, and the interests of those groups would be put over other interests. Then principal agent problem is when the interests of agents can differ from those of a principal. So an agent would be a politician. So the government would, so in this case, agent would be the government. Principal would be citizens. So the government agent may act against the best wishes of the citizens principal. So this happens a lot based on the interests of the government first. So the agents, so the agents' interests can potentially be put ahead of the principal's interests. This is an issue because the voters, because the citizens won't get what they need, basically. So that does happen. And then, so special interest effects. So small group obtains large gains at the expense of a much larger group who individually suffer small losses. So in this case, so like wealthy people, like the richest 1% of incomes, they may generate almost all of the wealth, and the lowest 99% of incomes will generate much less. A good question. That's a good question, Christopher. So it is it's principal agent. So principal is like is basically a person, and then principal like that is like a regulation or law or term, let's say. That's the difference. Good question. Good question. So government failure, there's clear benefits, hidden costs, unfunded liabilities, and chronic budget deficits, so economic efficiency, inefficiency, debt crises. So fiscal policy, they can use changes in tax rates and spending levels to offset the business cycle. Monetary policy, they can use changes in interest rates to regulate the economy. So they're doing that right now. So the Canadian government is raising interest rates to bring inflation down through reducing the money supply. And then inefficient regulation and intervention. So deregulation is used as an alternative. So this is done for when they like in certain industries, deregulation can be good in some cases, to an extent. So you want to balance regulation with deregulation. The problem with complete deregulation is that you get companies like Enron, which create which do extraordinarily unethical actions, such as shutting down California's power supply to drive up energy prices. So you need regulation. The regulation is required to stop these types of things from happening. So Enron did that. They actually shut down California's power supply, and this caused a shortage, thereby increasing prices through the roof. And they made a lot of money doing that. So you need regulation to prevent those types of things from happening. So you need a balance between deregulation and regulation. Too much regulation can be an issue. So like too much regulation can stop all business basically, because there are too many things to follow and everything is restricted. So you need a balance. You need a balance between regulation and deregulation. So then political corruption is the unlawful misdirection of government resources or actions for personal gain. So this is through bribery and demanding a bribe. The Sierra Leone is the place that has the highest amount of bribery in the world, followed by Kenya and then Uganda, and then other countries come after. So bribery isn't good for the economy. It's good to have lower rates of bribery because too much bribery can be a real issue to an economy. You need to have very little bribery in order for an economy to operate well. And then, so for institutions, the markets and government are both imperfect. So